Oh yeah, alright. Well, I'll tell you something, me and Evie, the Hawkamaniacs, they've been yelling, they've been screaming, they've been waiting. And I'm here, brother, because this DAMMOCALYPSE, it just can't last forever, brother. Those buns from Brussels thought he could take over the April pandemic sports flick section. The Hulkster ain't gonna stand for that. Cause I'll tell you something, me and Evie, and the Hawkamaniacs know this. It's not just the DAMMOCALYPSE we're up against, this COVID-19. It's the biggest threat to our American way of life since the $1 million man-backed Andre, brother. I'm here to save the day again, cause my 24-inch filmography's ready to flex. I just don't have a sports flicks, brother. We got the greatest film of all time. I'm talking the Citizen Kane of sports flick. No holds barred. Yeah, brother. And I just got one question for all my Hawkamaniacs out there. What you gonna do when Schlock takes on your favorite film for review? So what happens when Vince McMahon and Hulk Hogan, in their physical and financial primes, egos so big they make Tarantino seem humble, don't like the script for the film they're about to sink a whole lot of money into? Well, they just check into a hotel, binge on a bunch of cocaine, and for 72 hours straight, rewrite the script to their liking. That's really all one needs to know going into the late 80s sports fest that is No Holds Barred. It was the late 80s, Hulkamania was running wild, the then WWF was at one of its peaks in popularity. There was the initial WrestleManias and the Rock and Wrestling connection with MTV. It was all a big deal, and Hulk had had his first taste of mainstream success a few years earlier with a little cameo in Sly and the Family Stallone's Rocky III. And in recent years, Rowdy Roddy Piper and Jesse the Body Ventura had recently made the jump successfully in things like They Live, Predator, and of course, cinema classic Hell Comes to Frogtown. Hogan stars as a huge star of the wrestling world named Rip. Yes, he's named after what he would do when he'd come out and rip his shirt off for the fans. Apparently such a huge star that the other networks, they just want to take him down, because I guess this is like a world where the WWF network back then was like the scene in of wrestling. They're just running rip matches apparently 24/7, and these combat pleasure cruises are such a joy to revisit that the evil other network suits, I mean, they even watch his matches. They're just waiting for Rip to implode, but the Ripster's on way too much cocaine to be slowed down. Now this movie opens up, the Ripster beats some jobber, and Kurt Fuller, the head of the other network, is pissed. If you don't know him by name, you know him as a scumbag in countless flicks. He's your scumbag stand-in for Walter Peck in Ghostbusters 2. Even Rip has his price, says Fuller, like he's the $1 million man or something. And this is where we learn that Rip wears Hulk Hogan-style wrestling gear even in everyday life, even to a meeting. Al Pacino from The Irishman is good to be pissed. And Rip is also pissed at the audacity of these network scumbags. He shoves a blank check down Fuller's throat and says, "I won't be around when this check clears." We also get this horrible, I don't even know if you want to call it a car chase. The network gives the Ripster a ride home in a limo, and they take him the long way, and getting their own limo beat up in the process because apparently the Ripster's kicks are so strong it makes the car swerve. And then the Ripster breaks out of the sunroof like it's the barbershop window before beating the snot out of some of the network goons, and now it's our crying limo driver's turn. But wait, what's that smell? The Ripster asks while snarling like a rabid dog. Dookie. The crying limo driver answers. Poop joke number 2, and we realize exactly what a coke-fueled 72-hour writing session with Hulk and Vince really paid for. Now, after this Dookie debacle, the Ripster meets his new account executive, a hottie named Sam, and Hulk wants to roll her up into a small package pin. Yes, that's a real move. And she's definitely interested in getting to know the Ripster's 24-inch pythons. There's a big board meeting, but it doesn't really matter because the Ripster's not even paying attention to the meeting. He's paying attention to fantasizing about Sam. You can cut that sexual tension with a leg drop. And then she cuts off the meeting and says, "Hey, I'm taking you to dinner later." And she also asks him in a polite way to not dress like the biggest douchebag in the gym. So of course that means the Ripster's wearing an all-white suit straight out of Saturday Night COVID Fever. We also learn during this sequence that he speaks French. Yes, Hulk Hogan speaks French. Meanwhile, our network scumbags are heading into a bar. They're looking for something, anything that can destroy Rip. We also here get a joke about how the network scumbags are probably looking for a gay bar. And that quickly moves to one network executive making a joke about how he needs to go bleed his old lizard. Now this leads us into the most disgusting bathroom outside of an R. Kelly documentary, which leads to a tough guy from the bar coming in, and he's going to make fun of our network scumbags for having manhood sizes that just don't add up, in a scene that just lets you know that you can get some Oscar-worthy, politically correct dialogue out of a 72-hour coke binge. Anyhow, this trip to the bar leads Fuller to announcing that a tough guy tournament is on the network. It's sort of like those tournaments that the UFC used to do when they were first starting off, the type of tournaments that pissed off John McCain. But this is their big genius plan to find the baddest hombre around to defeat the Ripper. I guess you really don't have to wonder why this just didn't translate better to the audiences of the 80s. One of my favorite stories, and I think it's in Hulk Hogan's biography, is he brags about how the film made more in its second weekend than Ghostbusters 2. Now, this is actually true, but only because Ghostbusters 2 didn't open up until it was in its third weekend of release. Where in one weekend domestically, Ghostbusters 2 made about twice as much as No Holds Barred did in its entire worldwide box office run. Now, did it bombing kill Hulkamania? Of course not. Over the next few years, Hulk would be in several theatrical releases like Mr. Nanny or Home Alone with Hulk. He was in Suburban Commando. He continued to work pretty heavily in the 90s. He made appearances on the greatest TV show ever produced, Walker, Texas Ranger. He even got his own show for a while, Thunder in Paradise, which itself years later led to The Greatest Night of My Life, but that's a story for another show. Anyhow, back to the flick. We got Zeus himself, Tony Tiny Lister, who was in Universal Soldier, if you watch that Schlock, but Zeus was a big dude. My dad actually had a funny run-in with him and Jean-Claude. I'll get into that story some other time, but he shows up kind of like a buff version of Randy from A Christmas Story. You remember when he couldn't put his arms down, you know, he's flapping them and all that. Anyhow, he beats up a waitress right away because misogyny. Then he just beats the snot out of everybody in the tough guy competition, which is, of course, titled, appropriately enough, Battle of the Tough Guys. Now, the funny thing is Lister actually showed up to his screen test with the big Z shaved in his head. He was all in character, and yeah, he got the part. It's at one of these illegal fights, actually, where Rip's brother Randy shows up. Now, Randy doesn't seem to have all the pyrotechnics on his mental entrance operating, if you smell what The Rock is cooking. But he ends up revealing he's Rip's brother. Zeus is just choking Randy, squealing like a chicken, showing off his eyebrow that's shaped like a McDonald's logo. Fuller's looking on. He is pleased as pie with Zeus. You can cut the homoerotic tension with a steel chair. Now, Zeus earlier challenged Rip, but he was in the middle of hugging some kids, so he had to be nice. He wanted to turn him down. And also the fact that the bad guys showed up in a helicopter painted like a rainbow. Now listen, I got nothing against rainbows, but how are we supposed to take Zeus seriously as a villain as he's walking out doing his Christmas Story strut with the Sesame Street Express behind him? But now, because it's Rip's brother, it's serious. Rip, he's tearing off the door of Zeus's gym. He's tearing the mat up. He's fantasizing about seeing Zeus in the mirror. It's gonna go down. You can cut the homoerotic tension with a Hulkster snarl. We also find out that Sam, she's a sham, though she's not a pharaoh. She's too good to be true. She's a plant from the corporate bad guys, but the Ripster's so good at being a good guy or hulking up in the bedroom, kind of a mixture of both, because at one point he beats up some armed robbers right in front of her in some hole-in-the-wall restaurant, and then later on he goes a little, "It happened one night." If you've, anybody watching Schlock has seen that classic comedy, he puts up the walls of Jericho. Now, this makes her flip sides, kind of like James Bond flipping pussy galore from being a lesbian villain in Goldfinger, so she admits to Rip who she is. Now, for revenge for this, the network scumbags, they're not happy. First, Fuller slaps her because misogyny, and then they send in some thugs to beat her up and rape her in a parking lot, kind of like a scene from Death Wish. And no, I don't mean the Chucky Bronson flicks, I mean I have a death wish watching this crap. But anyhow, Rip intervenes. He's driving his motorcycle into the goon's butt, and then he launches him into a tree trunk. Now it's time for our main event. Randy is in a wheelchair. Samantha is kidnapped by our network scumbags, and Rip, well, he's told to lose or it's her life. Because apparently felonies and kidnappings, that's kind of meaningless next to getting those good ratings. And Zeus, he's wearing some sort of silver version of those gold wings that the Green Ranger wore in the Power Rangers. And Zeus, well, he's just handing Rip his lunch. He's just beating the snot out of him while his brother Randy cries, "Leave him alone," from his helpless, wheelchair-bound seat. Well, luckily bad guys are dumb, and Sam, the no longer sham, she escapes. She gives Rip the inspiration he needs to not only fight back, but win. The Ripster, he's hulking up like it's WrestleMania 3. Randy's feeling like he can walk again because the Hulkster's 80s Jesus or something. And Rip, he's fighting back. In fact, you can call wrestling fake, but actually filmmaking is real because Hulk really did break Zeus's nose here. But the fight ends up on the rafters where Rip, he's dropping Zeus like he's Alan Rickman right through the ring. Boom! We got our fireworks. Now Zeus, he may or may not be dead from the fall, but Rip, he's not worried about that. He's going after that scumbag Fuller. He's backing away, and he gets himself electrocuted because I guess these ratings are a little bit too much of a shocker for him. Now Rip, I guess we're not worried about him potentially being labeled an accessory in manslaughter because the crowd's going wild. We get that, that Rip hand signal and the 80s freeze frame, and it's Schlocker time. We have best worst 80s theme song Best unintentional product placement for Zeus's McDonald's eyebrow. Best repeated insult for jockass. Best way to turn a sunroof into a T-top, limo style. Best use of a 72-hour cocaine binge for the gestation of a screenplay. Best steroid rage for Hulk destroying Zeus's gym. So on my Schlock cinema scale of Winona Ryder's face is a walking emoji generator. I'm going to give No Holds Barred 1 Winona and a dookie grunt. The film is not good from the standpoint of filmmaking. It's not good from the standpoint of Schlock. It's not good from a wrestling perspective. And so basically what I'm saying is, it's highly recommended. Schlock!